Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to be reacting to a critique of PragerU video. This video that I'm looking at is from 2019, so it's a bit old, but still it's got some good points. So let's go ahead and watch it. By the way, when I say it's got some good, I mean this video, not the PragerU video. The PragerU video is terrible and just inaccurate in many ways. Anyway.
Hello everyone, this is a video responding to a Prager University video titled "If You Live in Freedom, Thank the British Empire."
Okay, first of all, that is that's incorrect. If you live in a country that has slavery or has had slavery predominant in its history, probably mostly thanks to the British Empire. So yeah, just saying. Freedom. Empires don't tend to have the greatest freedom. There aren't many empires that can say they've had no instances where the empire has been the reason why there is slavery in a particular area. Anyway, back to the video.
Hosted on the PragerU YouTube channel, currently with about 1 million views. The video is narrated by H.W. Crocker III, described by PragerU as a military historian and best-selling author. So, a few months ago, I made a video about PragerU titled "How PragerU Lies to You," where I put forward the radical, shocking idea that Prager University isn't actually a university, but is instead a YouTube channel funded by fossil fuel billionaires with the aim of promoting a biased and factually incorrect far-right worldview.
Yeah.
All of which, I think you'll find, is undeniably true and beyond dispute. Now, in that video, I mentioned that there were a few PragerU courses, and remember by courses I mean YouTube videos, that were worthy of a more in-depth look.
Yeah.
And so I've decided to take a peek at what is probably the worst of the bunch.
Yeah.
In fact, it is to me the most blatant propaganda PragerU have ever published.
I get I don't know why, if you want to promote right wing, you'd go with imperialistic England, because it's an empire, so effectively the system that it's in place is okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna do this stuff we tell you. You're gonna follow the orders of the empire, and that's not really necessarily full on right wing, as in, what I mean, as in, if I was to make a lot of money, let's say, and I was to say, well, I don't think that I should be taxed on that, and then that might be considered right wing. I said no taxes on any of it, none of it. But then, let's say someone came up to me and said, yeah, well, the way you have that money and you don't want it to be taxed. Well, we're not going to tax you. We're just going to take it. Just take it all off you. Just, boom. All of it is gone. No more money for you. All that land you bought. Yeah, we're taking that too. And by the way, you better get working, because we're basically enslaving you. I mean, don't you worry. You'll be paid dirt cheap. We'll get most of the money back in rent from the land you own now, but we will own, because we'll take it off you, and that makes total sense, doesn't it? You used to own the land, but then we'll just take it off you, and the money we give you, you'll be able to just about buy food to exist, and then the rest we'll just take back in rent from the land that you used to own. That seems great. Anyway, basically, yeah, that's not exactly slavery, but it's pretty. It's close enough to, basically make a statement that you'd be a bit concerned when American right wing propaganda are using the British Empire. It's don't go there, definitely not, because
Before we get to it though, I should mention that there are several other YouTube channels who have produced their own responses to this video, which you'll find if you do a YouTube search for PragerU British Empire Response. Now, usually seeing this sort of thing dissuades me from making my own video on the subject, as I consider the topic covered ground, but with this video I just couldn't help getting in on the action myself. It is just that bad. As always, I'd recommend that you watch PragerU's video first so you can be sure I'm not misrepresenting them, although I will
That
be
is
showing
important.
short clips here as I go. Right then, let's get to it.
Freedom was an Englishman's right, and wherever he went, he took that right with him.
So first of all, freedom was the some Englishmen's right, specifically the man part of it, specifically the noble part of it. You had to be fairly high up. To vote, you had to own property. Like, why would that be? So basically, to begin there, that is incorrect, really, because it's one specific type of English person. Very few people would fall into that bracket. And then, of course, it's just them. They didn't exactly, spread it about. But maybe PragerU will say they did. But, let's see how historically accurate they are.
Whether he was an English colonist in America, governing himself through a locally elected assembly.
Okay, so I'll have to stop it there. That was quick. Doesn't bode well, does it?
Yeah.
Now I have to ask if this guy, H.W. Crocker, knows about the American Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And I ask this not just because of that brief clip describing the American colonists enjoying all that freedom
Yeah, you do realize it's yes, well, we were here and there were a good few natives. We did have to brutally murder them, and the rest we tell them to feck off and get off the land that we now own. And then, of course, some people, that they didn't really like being forced off their land, so they tried to fight us. So we brutally massacred them. Anyway, so let's enjoy my freedom. Let's go. It's like, yeah, but you see, that's theirs. So that's one particular sector of the world, and it's only it's a very small percentage of the world is able to say would have been able to say at that time that they were in that position.
they had, but also because of this later clip.
This is our own history too. If you love America, you should also love the power that gave us our sense of inalienable rights. Rights traceable back to Magna Carta.
I'm going to stop you there. This is actually an interesting little fact about Magna Carta. The Magna Carta has been slowly being torn apart over the years, so that by now, very, 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 very small parts of Magna Carta are actually still left alive. So probably best not to bring up the Magna Carta when you want to reference the current, state, the current world as it is, because it's been mostly thrown out. Most parts of Magna Carta, so it's maybe just before you say, well, if you want to look at the ancestry, just think about, well, maybe this might be the ancestry, but here's the thing, it's mostly been thrown out, so that would tell you most of it is not here. And it's not a good sign if it's we had more freedom when there was more empires, more slavery, more monarchies. It's not a good sign when that apparently is the avenue going down. Basically, that statement is false. The Magna Carta is not necessarily the, direct result there.
It all started in America with the British Empire, a great liberty-loving empire. It is the empire's legacy.
Liberty-loving, yeah. All of those people who were enslaved and, forced to pay really high taxes without representation. It's a bit of a strange thing for an American especially, to be the liberty-loving empire, the one that, was here, and then we told them to feck off, because even for us, the people who kept slaves, even we were this is like a bit much, right? I mean, we're giving you all this money, and we have literally no say in what you do with that money. Like, no say at all. It's not even as if you're like saying we have a say, and then like at home, you're like, oh yeah, if you want to go out for election, yeah, you're not. If you're poor, you're not going for election or voting really. At all. Like that's the way your democracy works, but at least you're able to say it's a democracy. In our country, it's like you just take the money and be like, oh no, none of you have a vote. No, oh yeah, you're actually very rich, aren't you? But no, you don't have a vote. Really, that counts. No, not really. You know, that's that's one of the main key points of the American Revolution. Not best to call the British Empire, liberty loving, because it's not exactly. The whole kind of point is that you could argue is kind of, a bit of like you keep slaves, but you're also against the British Empire, right? Okay, that's the whole contradiction of the whole American War of Independence. It's like there's the contradiction there. That's the whole point. No, I'm just making that little point there. Anyway, back to the video.
The English-speaking world that remains the great global guardian of freedom today.
So the United States should thank the great liberty-loving empire that gave it its sense of inalienable rights. Now, nowhere in this video is it ever mentioned how the United States came to be, or that they fought a war against that great liberty-loving empire in order to be free of its control. I mean, that doesn't really make any sense, does it? If your only information about the United States or the British Empire came from this video, you would conclude that the British Empire peacefully passed the freedom baton to the United States, appointing them the new defenders of justice and freedom and liberty and all the other words that are used completely meaninglessly.
The British always thought of themselves as liberators, as bringers of freedom.
Sorry, no, I'm not even sure if they even thought of themselves as that. This is once again the problem of, stupid people. It's that oftentimes, even when they're actively being like, no, when you're not making a living wage, you shouldn't be given the extra money so that you can, eat. Like, I mean, you can have that opinion, but it makes it kind of selfish, right? But no, it's okay though. I mean, as long as you can admit you're being selfish, you're being selfish. Now, of course, you might want to live in a selfish world, and then that's not maybe in everyone's eyes a good world. But if that happens to be the case, maybe you do want to live in that world, whatever. But the problem arises when you start thinking, no, I'm not selfish at all. No, what I am is this thing. I'm not being selfish because what excuse can I come up with for not letting people have a basic wage that they can live off? This one here. No, there's a reason behind it. It's generally selfishness. Of course, you might want that. That's perfectly understandable. You want to be selfish? A lot of people do. A lot of people in this world are very selfish. So sure. Now, the English person brutally taking over another country and killing its inhabitants, and mostly in a lot of countries, basically either full-on enslaving them or semi-enslaving them. No, I don't really think they would have thought themselves as liberators. I think they would have more thought of all the money they were going to make out of that, and all the power they were going to have. That would be the thing that they would be thinking about. Anyway, back to the video.
The British believed the final and necessary justification of their empire was a moral one.
Now, here I'm afraid Mr. Crocker has fallen, perhaps deliberately, for some very out-of-date propaganda there. Claiming not to be conquerors or invaders, but actually liberators, has been a tactic of aggressors all through human history. The Roman Empire, for instance, disguised various aggressive campaigns as merely acts of defense. They exaggerated minor threats to justify overwhelming force, and so on. Even
Yeah.
Nazi Germany claimed to be acting in self-defense when they invaded Poland, staging a series of false flag attacks carried out by the SS in what was
Correct.
called Operation Himmler. Hitler declared in response to the attacks that he faked that he was mobilizing his defense forces until the safety of the Reich and its rights are secured. The British Empire may have claimed at times to be liberating and freeing people, but that was just a smokescreen for its real aims.
I'm not even sure like how many times they would have even done that, because like in my country they were like, oh yeah, no, we're liberating you. Give us all your food. That's what we're doing. Yeah. We're liberating you. Yeah, you're fighting us, aren't you? Okay. Oh, people, you know, they attack you even when you're helping them. Yeah, burn their village to the ground. That'll teach them. You know, it's I'm not even sure they would have even thought of themselves as liberators. I mean, other empires, maybe a little bit more. You know, Germany, America, a couple other empires, yeah, they would have used the we're liberating you tactic. But basically, yeah, the English not as much, because they're probably too brutal to, you know.
Territorial expansion, access to resources, power, glory, all the usual rubbish.
Yeah.
I'd advise looking into the events preceding the 1879 Anglo-Zulu War fought between the British Empire and the Zulu Kingdom if you'd like a handy example of the British Empire's use of extremely flimsy pretexts for provoking and justifying wars with people it was just invading. Yeah. Speaking of flimsy pretexts...
Oh, actually, yeah, there's...
How's that for a link there?
Even Gandhi praised the British Empire, paraphrasing Jefferson, saying that he believed that the best government was the government that governed least, and that he found that the British Empire guaranteed his freedom and governed him least of all.
Now, this is really...
Okay, governing him least of all. You see, there's an issue with being not really interfering people, and then just full-on interfering with them, but just not caring what the effects are. Just like, they call their crops. Oh, they all died? Jesus, we probably should have been more careful when we took all their food, that we didn't think, well, maybe if we take all their food, then they won't be able to eat, and a good portion of them are going to die. Maybe we should have thought that one through. No, actually, we shouldn't, because why would we care about them? Basically, that's the point. You see, the government, not government least of all, that can be a problem when you just give no assistance. When you take everything and then you just don't give anything back, it's like it's important. That's why in my country there's a minimum wage, and if you lose your job, you can go and get assistance from the government. Not always the best assistance, but in some cases it can be better than what some people are offering you, let's face it. But that's the thing. It's like, well, basically you can't just take it and then just not really govern at all and just like let everything kind of become like anarchy, but also you take most of the valuables,
Amazing, this bit. I think it's probably the slimiest, most deceptive argument PragerU has ever uploaded, and that's a field with some pretty stiff competition. So what's wrong with this quote? Did Gandhi say this? Well, kind of. This
Yeah.
quote is actually a paraphrase, and I consider the tactic of writing it alongside a little cartoon Gandhi as if he said those exact words to be rather shady, to say the least.
Yeah.
However, he did express that sentiment in 1915, as quoted in the speeches and writings of M.K.
2015.
Gandhi, published in 1922. Now, in the West, if Gandhi is known for anything, it's being a proponent of non-violent resistance to the
Yeah.
British rule of India. So why would Gandhi, who thought that the British Empire was the best government ever, according to this PragerU video at least, also be leading a resistance movement against it and asking that it leave India?
Yeah.
What a puzzle we have here. Now, that quote from the PragerU video is from 1915, as I said. However, their little cartoon there is actually traced from a photograph of Gandhi outside Downing Street 15 years later, which is a little deceptive there. What could have happened in those intervening 15 years? Anything that could have perhaps altered Gandhi's appraisal of the British Empire's governing abilities? Well, we'll see. Content warning for particularly nasty descriptions of violence in this next section, folks. And we'll start with the Rowlatt Act, otherwise known as the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act of 1919, which was a legislative act passed by the Imperial Legislative Council in Delhi on the 10th of March 1919, indefinitely extending the emergency measures of preventative indefinite detention, incarceration without trial and judicial review, enacted in the Defence of India Act 1915.
Where did I hear that before? You know? People being interned. Oh my. Where did you hear that before? Oh yeah. A ton of other countries that England was involved in. Yeah. That thing of like where you just take everyone. So that's the benefit of... You see, this is one of the benefits of being at war with another country or ruling over another country in that country. It means you can feck anything up and they can't do anything because they're not in your country. They're in their own country. You see, what it means is, let's say I have an army and I just kill a load of civilians. And the problem is those civilians were farmers. So now there's a famine and no one has any food. You see, if that was like a civil war, then obviously I'd be harming myself because then I'd have no food either. Or even if I had trade deals with that state and that was my food source, then I'd have no food. But you see, the thing is, if, on the other hand, let's say it was another country that I just invaded, then you see only those people and maybe a couple of other countries around them would be affected, and I wouldn't be. And you see, that's the benefit of attacking instead of just defending. If you're defending your own country, well, the best you can do is win, and then you have all this damage to deal with. And then they'll come back, and because you've got all this damage, you're in a worse position. The point is basically that, you know, it's a lot easier to win a war when you're fighting in someone else's territory and, you know, they don't have an upper hand due to knowledge of the area that is good enough. Like, as long as you're, because basically, you know, there's a lot of, attitudes where it's basically like, well, you know, I mean, if you just arrest everyone, obviously you'll get most of the people who want you out of the country. I mean, you also get a lot of innocent people. More than 50%. But yeah, a lot of innocent people. But if you're not really involved in that country and then like in the actual, you know, you don't actually care about the actual people on the ground, then you're not really going to care, are you? So basically, the point is that at the end of the day, it's just you want to be very careful when you're talking about, you know, the attitudes of the British Empire and, you know, success and all that sort of stuff. Because it's like, yeah, I mean, they're in another country where if they kill every single person, it's like it slightly negatively impacts them because they don't get to take as much stuff from the country, but then they also kind of do because then all the valuables, they kind of just take all them back, you know? as they did in many places, as the Nazis did in many places as well. Am I comparing the British Empire to the Nazis? I am, yes.
During the First World War, to quote Wikipedia there, indefinite detention without trial. That's the great liberty-loving empire at work there. Now, Gandhi responded to the passing of the Rowlatt Act by promoting non-violent civil disobedience, an act for which he himself was arrested. Gandhi's later resistance against the British Empire, the Salt March, the Quit India movement, and so on, are a little beyond the scope of my video, so right now we'll limit ourselves to this one particularly horrible event. So, on the 13th of April 1919, thousands of civilians gathered at a public garden in Amritsar to celebrate the Punjabi New Year festival, as well as to protest the recent actions of the British Imperial government, including the passing of the Rowlatt Act. Fearful of a rebellion, Colonel Reginald Dyer of the British Army ordered the main exits of the garden blocked, then ordered his troops to open fire without warning on the group of civilians.
My God! This seems very similar to another country that was trying to get independence from England, and they did the exact same thing. They barricaded the exits, and they shot a bunch of civilians into the crowd, just not really caring, if they hit anyone who was actually against them. Once again, that's the problem of being in another country where your people aren't there. It's that, you can kill all the civilians you want. The civilians are, you kill all the civilians. I mean, they're dead now. Now you get to take over the country and plant your own people. The point is basically, the other side can't. So in this case, they can kill all the civilians in the crowd they want, and they have absolutely no risk of killing one of their own. Isn't it just great to be an invasive force?
He later explained his actions were not to disperse the meeting, but to punish the Indians for disobedience.
Yeah.
British Indian sources gave a figure of 379 dead, with more than 1,000 wounded, whereas the Indian National Congress estimated that around 1,000 people were killed in the massacre. That's just one of the British Empire's terrible, violent massacres of innocent people there, none of which are mentioned in the PragerU video, and we have to wonder, why not? Well, not really. It's because they're shameless propagandists presenting a biased, one-sided view of history.
Yeah, like just in my country, the British Empire killed over 1 million people. Like over 1 million people. It's one country, 1 million people dead due to one empire. It doesn't exactly paint a picture of, freedom.
PragerU takes the approach of sticking their head in the sand and pretending such events never took place, so who knows what they think about it. However, we do know what this guy in particular, Crocker, thinks about the incident, as he describes it in his book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to the British Empire. And I'd like to note the "Free Cheers for Colonialism" tagline there. Also, I'd like to note that his Gandhi praised the British Empire non-point takes top billing among a list of similarly silly ideas. Anyway, here's how Crocker introduces Dyer, the colonel who ordered the massacre. Dyer was a hero of the old school. He had been born in India and spent his childhood there before being educated in Ireland and at Sandhurst. He had a gallant record that extended from service in the northwest frontier to Burma. Most of all, he was a man who stood by the British imperial principles of justice, fair play, and decency, delivered by force if necessary. Jesus.
Justice and fair play are pretty much the tactics of no empire, because that's not how, empires work. You can't invade a country and be like, hey, this is just. Like, no, it's not just. I mean, you might not do as, bad as a job as the English did with all of their imperialistic things, which they basically just like flush down the toilet, like, gender equality. You have gender equality in any of those little little areas Britain controls, that'll be gone soon because they'll make sure to remove that out of your society and breed very sexist men. So even the ones who might be in charge of independence movements, yeah, even they might be a bit sexist because what the can you expect? Anyway, basically the point is you might want to just, be a little bit wary when it comes to describing the British Empire as fair play. I mean, good few assassinations, so.
On the massacre, Crocker writes, Dyer ordered his men into line and without delay gave the order to fire. 379 Indians were killed and more than 1,000 were wounded. The mob was dispersed, and so was the feared rebellion in the Punjab. Dyer became a hate figure to anti-colonialists. Imagine that. And was repudiated by liberal opinion and the British government at home. And for what? Just for murdering a bunch of people.
Yep.
Jeez. Crocker, PragerU's lecturer, is here justifying the deliberate massacre of unarmed civilians and calling the man who ordered that massacre a hero. And that's a direct quote. That is his own.
I don't even see, how is he a hero anyway? You do realize, okay, imagine you're thinking, okay, so Johnny here, he doesn't like that the British Empire control you. But you're not sure. And then Johnny is brutally murdered, and so are all your family by the British Empire. And you're thinking, okay, maybe you know what? Now, I think, I might actually be joining now. And so are a lot of other people. Basically, violence against people when they try to, come up against your oppression. It may be effective in stopping them from actually gaining that freedom, but it doesn't stop them from wanting more. More people will join. Now, maybe they won't be effective, but more people will still join. So the point is, you're not much of a hero, are you? Even from any perspective. It's like, oh, you were successful in stopping India getting its independence? I don't think you are, though. I mean, you aren't really. So, hero? You've murdered people. So, that's one side you could take, which is, no, you're not a hero. And then you failed and also murdered people. That didn't work. So, yeah. Also, pretty much failure.
Own word. We see what he really thinks of liberty and justice and freedom here. They're just words to disguise the only thing he really respects, which is force. Do what we say or we'll shoot you dead, and then declare ourselves heroes for it. It's hard to miss the white supremacist vibe here. And if you think that's a little too much, I'd like to point out that the first section of another of Crocker's books, The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Civil War, is titled Why the South Was Right. That book is glowing in its praise for the Confederate States, which, for anyone who doesn't know, fought a civil war against the United States because they wanted to uphold slavery.
Yep.
It consists of fawning profiles of Southern generals and harsh criticisms of Northern ones, very boring descriptions of battles, which is the worst sort of historical writing, and it ends with a bizarre bit of fan fiction talking about how great everything would have been if the South had won the war.
Guess what? If there had been no civil war, the South would have abolished slavery peacefully as they freed the country. Peacefully. In the 19th century. When did Britain make slavery legal in England? Oh yeah. Not then. Yeah, a bit later than the 19th century, but at least they made it legal in the Empire, so that their subjects couldn't have slaves, but they could, because in England you were allowed to have slaves. Yeah, that makes sense given their track record. The Confederate States of America might have helped the Allies win World War I sooner. The people... Okay, first of all, there's kind of a bit of an issue of, phrasing World War I as even... it's a bit dodgy to say, well, this group of people who are very imperialistic and this group of people who are very imperialistic. It's good that this group won, right? Because they took more territory. They took more land. After they won, they took more land. Those feckers said, oh, we'll take this bit here and this bit here. Oh, that was your land. Well, you took it by force. So we're just going to take that too. There are people living there, but well, tough for them. Basically, my point is, First World War, there's kind of a bit of an issue arguing that is a good thing, that was a victory, should never really happened, really. But, the point being, well, you can argue World War II. Yeah, sure. Nazis, very, very evil feckers. And, even though the Allies are, a lot of the Allies weren't exactly the best people either. But the point is, Nazis, very evil too. The point being, though, it's that, basically, a bit dangerous when you're making an argument that the South would have helped the First World War end sooner. I'm not sure they would actually. If the South had won the war, Cuba would be a state of the reunited states. Right, and I'm sure the Cubans would just love that. More imperialism. I can see why you love the British Empire. Probably best, not to try and tell people from other countries this, because, people from other countries know the British Empire was terrible because they killed their people. Like, even fascists know the British Empire is terrible. Now, they might want to replace them. That's gets the whole situation with empires, like hating each other. It's like, these people are bad. It's like, yeah, but you're the same. It's like, well, we want to take over their territory that they took by force. But, basically, yeah, they would make. Don't think people would like that.
Well, actually, it ultimately ends with these words, which were the national motto of the Confederate States, just in case there were any doubts as to where the author's sympathies lie there. Now, Let me just say, I am fine being considered politically correct if that means thinking slavery and the mass murder of innocents is bad.
Yeah.
By the way, I just thought I'd throw that out there. If that's what being politically incorrect means, then count me out,
The British did not try to nation build in the way we think of it now.
What?
They were under no illusions about making Arabs or Afghans or Zulus into Englishmen.
That is not really true, actually. They did put a lot of their own country. I would say the Romans were, in fact, less nation-building than the British. Because, the British were like, well, you're going to have to learn English. You're going to have to follow all of our laws. All the sexist ones, all the homophobic ones. Many countries, that are very, very homophobic now can thank England for that. It's just a lot of, problems with the world kind of arise from England. No offense to the English now. Your ordinary English person, it's not their fault that their ancestors were complete and utter morons. And it really wasn't even their ancestors. It was just like the people from the higher up. Anyway.
They were more than content to leave people alone.
No, they weren't.
To let them be themselves.
No, they weren't.
To govern them with the lightest possible hand.
No, they were not, actually. Not at all. Unless you mean in the sense that they would govern you and just kind of have people who weren't there. Like in my country, a lot of the times people who were supposed to be governing the country were, they weren't there. They were in London. There was like, you're in charge of running that country there, right? Where are you? So are you in the capital? Oh, you're not? Maybe you're in the other areas. It's good to be in the other areas and not just focus on the capital. Oh, you're in London. Oh, right. Okay. Well, I guess that's fine. Sure, we'll just continue putting all the rules that affect our country onto that country. Even if they are slightly different because that country is very agricultural while our country is very industrial. So our countries are still fairly different in that way. So, anyway, back to there.
So then, Ireland. Now, I've used this line of argument before, but I would really like to see this guy explain to the Irish that the British were content to leave people alone and let them be themselves.
Over 1 million people died in Ireland, and 1 million others had to emigrate. Otherwise, they risked dying too. So yeah, that's 2 million people gone out of the country from one event. Then you got the old internment policies that happened both in the north and in the south. And also leaving the country in a state that was open so a dictator could take over and run the country, and hand power to the Catholic Church, which, by the way, was a very stupid thing to do. And basically, at the end of the day, ruin the entire country. And also take everything that was valuable about it and just bring it home.
And there's too many things to even talk about here, of course. Cromwell's conquest of Ireland.
Yeah, that shit. To hell or to Connacht. Well, the way, sure, I mean, what can you say about Cromwell? Brutal murderer as well. But I would say probably worse. Interestingly, actually, Richard, who was before Ireland, was another fella very similar to Cromwell, liked to burn villages down to the ground. And then, he was demonized. The English said that he killed his own nephews. He didn't kill his own nephews. But it's like, what can you expect from, Henry? He's like, Henry, it's like, I'm pretty sure it probably won't work if I say, all the murders he did in Ireland, all the villages he burnt to the ground. It probably wouldn't be best if I argue that way, because English people don't care about Ireland and they care about all the loads of people who are just dead now. So I'm going to say he murdered his 2 nephews, because 2 seems just so much more horrific than, hundreds of thousands.
The mismanagement of the response to the Great Famine, which led to
the response, the cause. That's the little point. See, one of the things we'll say was that the famine didn't really happen because it wasn't really a famine, because it was just the potatoes that died. Like, Ireland didn't just what did people think? That Ireland just grew potatoes? That's all they had? No, they grew many, many things. They had all sorts of vegetables and all sorts of foods available. It was just that the English were like, well, you see, those are our foods. We want those foods. So that we can have them, and also so that we can sell them from England. Same thing with America. They all would oftentimes force countries that they were ruling over they would take the resources from the people and just be like, we have that now. And then when obviously the potato goes, it's like, I guess you can have some corn. You will need to cook it. We won't tell you that, or, even assist you in cooking it. So yeah, that's right. We'll give you a bit of corn. Will be enough corn, but, yeah. And, you won't be able to really use it even if you do get it. And, by the way, if you steal it, yeah, you're a criminal. We're going to execute you. Or, send you off to Australia or something. That seems really, really good. Anyway, back to the
mass starvation and emigration.
Yeah.
The prohibition of the Irish language being taught in schools.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm a fella who can say, yeah, I would say, I've talked about it before that the Irish, government, when they gained independence, did mismanage, getting Irish back into the people, because they kind of were just like, you're gonna learn it. It's like, but it's not useful at all. We can talk to no one. That's the point. That's why this fella is wrong, because, England forced their, the citizens of its empire to learn English. Now, what that meant was that when you had this new youth who were like, maybe we want to break free from England, and it's like, well, should we then ditch the language? And they're like, it's very useful, because we can talk to a lot of people from other countries, but that is because of the empire thing. It's because they forced it on other countries. Like, they didn't have a lot of countries that were speaking it, and then a few more came along. It was like they literally just started expanding and forcing countries to learn it. Anyway, back to the video.
Margaret Thatcher, generally.
Jesus Christ, yeah. Margaret Thatcher, yeah, not the best one when it comes to the old Irish. Like, no, they're not. They're criminals. They're not. They shouldn't be treated as politically different. They should be treated as criminals. And yeah, they're starving to death unless, no, we're going to let them die. That seems like a very, very nice thing to do. Just let the prisoners in your care just die painfully, very painfully, in fact. Yeah, that seems very, very, very nice thing to do. Maybe don't do that, Margaret. But what can you expect from Margaret? They didn't manage to kill her, but
generally, that was sort of a shared burden, that one, though.
Yeah, let's face it, that was, yeah. Yeah, I think at that point, I think, I think at times, the IRA needed to do there was say to the people in the hotel, how about this, lads? She's a bit of a monster to you too, It's not just us she's a monster to. It's not just our people she let starve to death. She also let your people starve to death too, the way when she just, removed all those jobs. It was just like, yeah, no, they're gone. I mean, that seems... that, like, and then what happened later on? All those people lost their jobs and, that greatly negatively impact Britain. And then Britain realized, oh wait, maybe we shouldn't be entirely dependent on foreign countries for our energy production, like just because it's cheaper. There's a benefit to a premium price if the price is, for your own energy. There's a benefit there, Margaret. It's kind of a stupid idea to be like, how about this? How about we make ourselves completely dependent? The energy that runs the entire country. That makes it so that, we have lights and just everything of production works. Well, let's make sure that all the electrical outlets are powered, and all these things, all these things, all our energy is bought from other countries, All our oil is now, it is mostly bought from other countries, or stolen. Now we'll have our coal bought from elsewhere as well. That seems like a really good idea. Being completely dependent on another nation for your energy. That doesn't seem like it would be unwise at all. It's not like there was a recent war in which a country that has committed multiple human rights violations is basically holding many European nations on a chokehold by saying, well, you're going to continue to give us all those billions for, the energy we're selling you, right? You're going to continue doing that? Ha, ha, ha. Such a fucking hypocrite, aren't you? You'll sanction us, but then actively give us more money. Like, yeah, you're not allowed to access that 2 billion quid. Here's 20 billion there for you for the energy. It's not like that's the case that's happening now. It's not like when Margaret Thatcher was alive that, scientists were saying, Margaret, maybe we should go to green energy. Maybe we should do that. But Margaret didn't go that way. Margaret went, no, instead, let's close the mines and go over and make ourselves dependent on other countries. And then, because then later on, our government can realize that's a stupid fucking idea. And why the fuck anyone would do that is just ludicrous. Like, you just see the figures and one figure is lower and you say, that one's good. I like that one because that one makes sense because it's a lower figure. Oh, what? It means that you're at risk of your entire energy shutting down if anything happens to the country. That you have no involvement. You could have no involvement. You could make absolutely no bad decisions. You could be a perfect. Your country could be doing perfectly fine, and you're ruled perfectly fine, and then that country has problems, and then you're affected because of that. Yeah, that seems very smart. Anyway, back to the video.
And all the problems with the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland
Yeah.
that are currently still now ongoing
Yeah.
thanks to Brexit. But hold on there a second, Shaun. Say, all 10 of you diligent folks who actually go and watch the other video when I suggest it. PragerU's video actually references Ireland in the single instance of admitting that the British Empire was not completely perfect. Let's have a watch.
Even where the British have merited criticism, as in Ireland, there is more to the imperial story. During negotiations to create the Irish Republic, for instance, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, who could speak Welsh, reminded the Irish nationalist and Gaelic extremist Eamon de Valera that the Celts never had a word for republic. It was an idea given to them by the English.
No, actually it wasn't. It was an idea given to them by the Greeks, you fucking idiot. Anyway, so basically the thing is, right, is that the Greeks invented the idea of a republic. And once again, David Lloyd George also wasn't involved in the formation of a republic. Okay? That's another thing. So you see, first of all, you had home rule. Then you had the Free State. Then you had the Republic. That's what we have now, you Egypt. You see, you can't just look at a map and see Republic of Ireland and then just go, oh, it was straight to Republic of Ireland, because it wasn't. You see, it was a gradual thing. And unfortunately, it wasn't even a republic anyway, because Eamon de Valera was basically a dictator. So, sure, great republic. Anyway, point is, David Lloyd George wasn't, really in that sense, just make you aware. Anyway, back to the video. I'm just want to make you aware, because it's kind of important to be historically accurate. That, well.
So, what was that? Crocker admits that the Empire merited criticism in Ireland, which is putting it rather lightly.
Yeah.
But as a counter-argument, quotes David Lloyd George talking about the origin of the word republic, which has nothing to do with anything.
And it's also
not only
wrong.
is it completely disconnected from any of the criticisms that the British Empire merited, it's a misquote. Now, there are different accounts of this particular conversation.
Like, here's the thing, right? Like, De Valera in 1921 is not the fella. Do you understand, right? Also, like, that's not like. Also, never mind.
But none of them are so ludicrous as to credit the English with the concept of the Republic. That's from the Latin, as is this Irish word, which has its roots in populace there, which was one of two competing Irish translations of the word Republic at the time. Not that any of this matters, of course. What a really bizarre way to avoid actually mentioning any of the crimes of the Empire. Never fear, though. If we want to see exactly what Crocker thinks about the...
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, basically, just to make you aware, Crocker, if you're watching this, is that, basically, before this, what the English did was they sent a bunch of, criminals and, people with PTSD into Ireland, and they were told, you kill civilians, I mean, you're not really going to suffer any punishment. And then they also didn't tell them who the enemy was. They were just like, the enemy is some of those guys. We don't know who the fuck they are. I mean, we kind of do, but we're not going to tell you. So you're just going to have to just sort of figure it out for yourself. So basically, tough, finding out if they're a civilian or not. And good luck with that. You probably won't murder multiple civilians on it. I mean, you just did. Anyway, just to make you aware also, some of those people then went on to go to Palestine along with, and there was a couple of them who were like the usual sort of kind of army fellas, rapists. A lot of army fellas are rapists for some reason. don't know why armies think that that's a good thing. Like they're a civilian that you just kind of get shocked by that. That you can kind of expect it from people who aren't exactly the best, but like people who kill little children, and think that's okay because they're the enemy, but they're not the ones fighting. I mean, there are child soldiers, but like even when they're not child soldiers, they still kill them, and it's like, and you don't think you should be punished for that? And the British government would say they shouldn't be, but I would disagree with them. Anyway.
The Irish, we can just once again take a peek at his politically incorrect guide to the British Empire, where we see him talking about Ireland's recidivist barbarisms. He says, "There is much to admire about the Irish, but it is also easy to see why the English, when not regarding them as comical, tended to see them as shiftless, ignorant, stubborn, contumacious, and cruel." Crocker.
Okay, cruel? That's like people call the Native Americans cruel when Columbus literally chopped off people's hands and arms for gold. Just there's a bit of gold there. I mean, I'm just going to slice and boom. Do you understand? Columbus was imprisoned because he was so bloody cruel that even the people who were sponsoring him were like, that's going a bit far. I mean, man, you see, here's the thing. To be a fella, we just want the resources. Now, if you're cruel and you kill a lot of people to get those resources, we're kind of fine with that. But you're just being needlessly cruel here. We're just what's going on? We want the resources now. We don't want to, kill a bunch of people unnecessarily unless we're going to get resources out of it. You're literally chopping off body parts for just no reason, just because give me gold, and you chop. But what the hell is that about? The point is, I'm trying to make is that I don't think the English can call the Irish cruel, and also, stubborn. That tends to happen when you try and invade another country. They tend to be quite stubborn in fighting you. It is one of those things that tends to happen, unfortunately, for you. I mean, it's called not winning yet. Not having a victory just yet. Don't worry though. The Irish did lose multiple times, English people, so you can feel good about yourself that way. Ignorant. Yeah, I mean, that one's a bit on the nose. It's when the English people came here, they brought with them new farming techniques where they would just chop down all the trees that were covering Ireland, and they were just because now we have farmland. So instead of just chopping down an area for you to farm and chopping down an area for your house, we just chop down all the trees. Of course, the issue then arises now when we have not enough trees to take in the carbon from the atmosphere. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that Ireland wouldn't have actually done that themselves. Just saying, it'll chop down all the trees first.
Concludes that the English left Ireland language.
Okay. So, let's get down to this. So the English left Ireland language. Ireland actually already had language, and they already had laws. I know this might become a bit of a shocker, but Ireland actually had a lot better laws than England when it comes to equality. So, for example, women had a lot more rights in Ireland before the English arrived. And don't you worry, all you patriarchal people, because it wasn't like when Ireland got its independence from Britain, it was really good then, because it did one good thing. It gave women the right to vote, and then just Amy de Valera took over, and the entire thing just collapsed. He wrote into the Constitution that women should belong in the home, as a fucking patriarchal would do. Gave all the power to the church, and continued to oppress women in a really, really massive way, and also banned abortion. So, well, what can you expect from a fellow like that? The point I'm making is that while, yes, sure, Ireland after it got its freedom was totally ruined by that feckin' Egypt Eamon de Valera, also, English kind of soldiers, they were the ones that sort of brought in that sexism to begin with. So, once again, the English Empire is responsible for, homophobia spreading in a lot of countries. So just think about that and then think, well, maybe, the laws England had being more sexist and being more exclusionist and being more about, your hierarchy and nobility, which brings us into the nice little area of parliamentary government. I mean, England had a monarchy. That's not what we call parliamentary government. I know this might come, but basically, the Roman Empire, right? When you had your emperor, you didn't have your Senate anymore. You still had your Senate, but the Senate had no power. That's basically what England's, government was. Okay, when they took over Ireland, that's what it was. Just a bunch of people who've got no feckin' power because the king/queen has all the power in the world. Okay, not in the world, but in England, they've got all the power. So it's not really a good thing to be like, well, they gave them parliamentary government, where the people are told there is a monarchy here and you must love the king, but there's also a parliament that does nothing and you can't vote for it because you're poor and not of noble birth. So, okay, I'm beginning to see problems with calling this a democracy, but the people will believe anything. So, anyway, yeah, but it did nothing. Right.
Laws and parliamentary government, but did nothing to tame the stubborn pugnacity of Ireland's Celts. Jeez, left Ireland language. It already had a language,
yeah.
Honestly. If you had to guess when this racist drivel was written, you'd guess 1910 or something, wouldn't you? Not 2011, which is when it actually was released. Now, not mentioned in the PragerU video, of course, are any of the Empire's various other crimes, which again are too numerous to mention here. There's nothing about the Empire's use of concentration camps in Africa, its massacres of indigenous Australians, overseeing a famine in India that killed and displaced millions of people during the...
Yeah, another famine. It seems like a lot of empires love using famines to terrorize people. It's kind of their thing, empires and dictators, You have one in Russia, one in China, one in India under British rule, one in Ireland under British rule, one in, I think the Roman colonies have the same sort of an issue. It seems like maybe, I don't know, maybe famines tend to happen more under dictatorships and empires, because the person at the helm doesn't really care, because number one, they don't have to have popularity to stay in power, because it's like they stay in power using force, and well, number two, oftentimes they just don't really care about their citizens because, well, they got there by force. So you kind of had to disregard the citizens to begin with to be there in that position. So, you're unlikely to really care. Anyway, back to the video.
During the Second World War, though I'm sure Crocker could find someone and displaced millions of people during the Second World War.
Yeah.
Though I'm sure Crocker could find someone loosely associated with each of those events who had once said the word republic or liberty or something. Don't look at all the bodies, just say words like freedom and liberty over and over. Now, I earlier said that those words were being used meaninglessly, and just to back that up a bit, I'd like to quote again from Crocker's politically incorrect guide to the Civil War. He says, "The Confederate States of America, in short, had formed a republic with a limited government that guaranteed individual and state rights. Unless you were a slave, of course. And unlike the Republic up north, didn't insist on subjugating states that didn't want to be a part of it. The Confederacy might have had slavery, as the United States did, but it was no tyranny."
Jesus Christ. I wonder, this is my problem with people like this. It's the issue of having propaganda with stupid people because it sounds stupid. So there's either two options. Either the people you're trying to convince are actively just very, very thick, or you are. And at times you think, you don't seem to be that thick. You just seem to be just a horrible person that deserves to, pass away very, very quickly. The point is that, tyranny, but they wanted to keep slaves. Right, yeah, because, as we all know, slavery, there's nothing tyrannical about owning a person, forcing them to work for literally no money at all. And the only reason why they're even not dead is because you kind of feed them, and in some cases not even that. And that kind of thing, that sort of thing. Like, why would that be considered tyrannical? Squeezing every little bit of labor. Yeah, no, that's almost the definition of tyranny. I also I know this might be a thing, but you see, basically, if they wanted to take other states in, that wouldn't be so much tyranny as it would be imperialistic. Because you see, if those other states didn't want to be part of it, then that would be an imperialistic thing, wouldn't it? And you see, that's the problem. You can't be for empires, but then be like, oh, but this one is a tyranny, because they're all tyrannies. That's kind of the thing empires do. You see, because they're kind of, that's the whole thing. Anyway, back to the video.
Again, unless you were a slave.
Yeah.
Now, the United States of America is presented throughout this book as the aggressor, as denying the southern states their inalienable right to own other people, as being anti all those good words like liberty and freedom and so on. Crocker's allegiances will change with the conflict. He'll sing the praises of the United States in the PragerU video, whereas in his books he writes fan fiction about it being defeated and conquered by an enemy.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre trend among people who claim to love Western civilization to fight.
That's the thing, you do know there's another option, which is you just declare that you're not part of the country. You just refuse to pay taxes to that government. You form your own government, and you just act as if you are the government, and then soon people will just start being like, well, it basically is another government. There are people in power, and there are people in place to protect that. There's an army there and everything, and then all you need to do is to not have the other states of America to be like, well, no, that's not allowed, and to attack you, because if they don't do that, then in which case you're kind of fine. Basically what you do is you just ask, can we be separate from you? And basically that's how you do things. And that's an option you can do, except the problem is that, it won't really help you when you want to get others. It's basically a very similar thing to Northern Ireland and Ireland. It's like, well, one section kind of wants stuff, but then there are people in the other section who want different stuff. It's like, so you got supporters here, but basically you're going to say feck them, because that it would be damaging to just say like, well, we want those 2 people out of that 100 to have those things. Yeah, that's not really your majority. Basically, you stick with your majority. That's most of the thing. Anyway, back to the video.
Find themselves praising its greatest enemies. For instance, new PragerU collaborator Candace Owens recently got herself in some hot water for claiming that Hitler would have been fine if he kept his ambitions inside Germany. Now, I'd like to...
What? Oh my god, even before Hitler tried to commit, did, genocide. He was committing exclusionist laws against Jewish people, saying you can't own property, you can't have this. Once again, very similar to the British Empire. I'm not saying the British Empire is as bad as Nazi Germany, because it didn't technically kill as many of its own people. But I mean, does that make things better? I mean, well, maybe, who knows? And all I'm saying is basically, no, Hitler is a terrible person. Even if he did stay inside Germany, he'd still be a terrible person. Like that. That's the thing. It's like, what? No, that's not how that works. If I murder someone when I'm on holidays, does that make it worse than if I murder someone when I'm in my own country? No. No, it's the same. It's just as bad. You shouldn't. It's not like, oh no, it's fine. I did it at home, Louis. It wasn't. No, when I was on holidays, I didn't murder anyone. It was when I got home. That's when I murdered someone. Because that makes it fine, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. That's not how anything works. Basically, the point is that that's just kind of insane. I mean, what?
I'd like to close out today by asking who on earth this video was made for.
Yeah.
Anyone in or near a former British colony will immediately recognize it as bullshit.
Yeah.
Maybe it was made for Americans who don't know about the Revolutionary War, I guess. British nationalists who refuse to admit the empire wasn't purely altruistic. Maybe just the far right in general. I don't know.
Wait.
Genuinely.
Once again,
what you think in the comments.
I think you must be kind of thick if you don't think empires do bad things. Sure, you can think, well, yes, they do bad things, but to other people, to people I'm not a part of a group of, they never did any bad things to me, so basically, it's fine, because it's fine for me, because I wouldn't be negatively impacted if the British Empire was still in existence, Basically, the point is that in this essence, you're in the point of saying, well, it wouldn't affect you negatively, and would a lot of times, benefit you greatly. For example, if you're a billionaire and someone says, should we have higher taxes on the uber wealthy, those earning over 10 million quid a year? And you go, no, because that would negatively affect me. Obviously, if you're, earning 5 million, you'd be like, well, I'm not earning as much as this tax thing is, so surely you'd say, well, yes, I would. It doesn't affect me, and it's a good thing because that means, you have the wealthy not just paying very little tax. The point being is that basically you're just an idiot if you are going to support something that affects you, negatively. And it's like, well, this would harm you though, you idiot, or this doesn't really affect you, Why are you angry on another person's behalf about something that doesn't affect you when, in essence, that thing is a good thing for the people? Of course, that gets a whole different argument of, what's good for people. But, basically, the point I'm making is that, you still, even if you think this thing benefits you, you still need to admit it does do bad things to other people, So, even if you wanted the British Empire, a lot of people could still admit the fact that it did bad things. It wasn't just, oh, yeah, well, it did not, it did bad things. But it did bad things that benefited a lot, not a lot, but a good few English people, who got all that money and all that, all the resources there. That's why you have your nice, fine houses, and that's why the nobility were able to survive so long, because they've got so much money, Basically, empires, they do bad things, but they can benefit the few by just handing everybody else's resources to them. The point being, if you want to support something that benefits you, sure. Just if it does negatively impact people, you kind of need to accept that.
Maybe it was made for the world's worst homeschooling teachers. You see, this one has a study guide with questions to answer afterwards as well.
Wow. What was an Englishman's right? What main point does Mr. Crocker make in case for the British Empire? What a shit.
The British were more than content to leave people alone, to let them be themselves, to govern them with the lightest possible hand. True,
Incorrect.
False.
False.
It's fucking ridiculous. That's all from me today, folks. Sorry to go back to the PragerU well so soon, but I saw this video and how many views it had and had to start typing a response immediately. Thanks, as always, to all of my patrons who support me over on Patreon, whose wonderful names should be on the screen right now. If you'd like to join them in supporting the channel, click that Patreon link below the video and go check it out. I'll also include links to my Twitter and Curious Cat pages if you fancy giving me a follow or asking me a question. Also, a quick behind-the-scenes note here. We're coming up on 200,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. We'll probably pass that within a couple of days, actually. And I'll be putting out a quick Q&A video sometime soon to celebrate, so look forward to that. Right, thanks folks, and I'll see you next time. More like Crocker shit. Thank you.
So yeah, that was a video from Shaun on the PragerU and the British Empire. Yeah. PragerU's taking the British Empire. Very, very wrong. Anyways, that was that. So thank you for watching, and once again, do go ahead and subscribe to Shaun, because this was where the original video came from, and this video is basically kind of, you know, it's kind of easy to do because it's just me like pausing the video and watching it, and you know, basically go to their channel, subscribe to their account, you know, you click subscribe, you know, you go ahead, you click your like button, you know, and you know, that way you show the appreciation, because obviously if you enjoyed this video much like I enjoyed their video, because this wasn't a critique of their video, this was a view of their video critiquing that video, and then me also critiquing that video through their video, because you know, basically, yeah. Anyway, the point I'm making is that yeah, go ahead and subscribe to their channel. Bye.